Welcome, everyone. I am Ravi Shankar, and this is IsoBreak, the APWT and New York Writers Workshop co-production. And I'm very excited about today's reading. We're going to hear from a number of First Nations writers from Australia, from New Zealand, from Fiji. But I just wanted to begin, as we do sometimes, even though I'm here in a virtual space. I'm speaking to you from Rhode Island in the US. And when the Europeans began to explore this territory, there were actually 5 indigenous groups living here: the Pequots, the Nipmunks, the Niantics, the Narragansetts, and the Wampanoags. And to give you a sense, by the beginning of the 18th century and the King Philip's War, there was only 2 groups left. Most of them were decimated, disbanded, fled to Canada. And so I just want to begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the land and the leaders, both past, present, and emerging, and recognize that the territory that I'm speaking to you from has been unceded and is the traditional grounds. And I think it's really important, especially here in the US, where over half the state's names are indigenous words, and yet no one really recognizes that or knows that. And so to kind of spread the voice is one of my missions, and it's a really important thing, I think. So I want to actually, first, I want to bring everyone on screen for a second. And we have a wonderful reading today. And we're going to begin by hearing from each of the writers, as we always do. And then we will have some time for Q&A and conversation. And so I encourage those of you that are listening to put in any comments anytime and ask any questions, because we're here to have kind of interactive conversation. So we're going to begin by, and good evening and good morning. It is quite early in the morning here. So our North American friends maybe will see this at a later date. But our first reader, and someone who's going to speak a little bit about this wonderful endeavor of fair trade and Red Room poetry, is Anne-Marie Tiwu Tirurawa, a poet, an editor, a cultural producer, and a weaver based in the unceded Gadigal lands of Sydney. She has edited works such as Solid Air, Australia's and New Zealand's spoken word anthologies, Whisper Song by Tony Birch, and More Than These Bones by Bebby Beckhouse, who we're going to hear from today. She's dedicated to platforming the creative output of Indigenous people around the world, and was previously the co-director of the Queensland Poetry Festival. She's worked as a producer at such cultural institutions as the Museum of Brisbane, the Judith Wright Center of Contemporary Arts. She's won fellowships through the Wheeler Center, and her writing has been published very broadly in journals, books, magazines, from Cordite, Rabbit, Australian Poetry. And she is actually very excitingly, and I hope we can kind of hear about this and talk about this a little bit, finalizing her 2 debut poetry collections. So 2 at the same time, amazing. They're titled Metal and These Are the Bodies That I Have Found. And in addition to being a fabulous producer and poet, she is also a weaver, and her weaving has been recently exhibited at the Black Dot Gallery and the Conscious Mike Collective. And just was awarded a 2023 Clothing Store Artist Studio, where she's going to have a dedicated space to write and weave. Amazing. She's a senior project manager at Red Room Poetry, and she founds and leads the International Poetic Exchange Initiative, Fair Trade, which we're going to hear about today. And I think all of these poems are going to culminate in a collection entitled Woven, which is a collection of collaborative Indigenous poems, and that will be out next year. So it's so wonderful to have you, Ani. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this hour and a half that we have together. So the floor is yours.
Oh, Ravi, kia ora. Thank you so much. What a beautiful and generous and warm welcome. Thank you so much. I think the last time we met was up on Yugambeh country on the Gold Coast when APWT had the conference there, and it was really special to hear you read in person. So lovely to be connected back with you here digitally. I also want to start by acknowledging that I am on unceded Gadigal lands. These lands always were and always will be Aboriginal land. I tread the earth as lightly as I can while I'm here. And part of my mandate of my work, as Ravi just said, is that I push Indigenous voices to the front in the poetic environment, the poetic field. One of the hats I wear is a producer at Red Room Poetry. I'd encourage everyone to go and check out Red Room Poetry. They're based here in Gadigal country on the Eora Nation. And I was fortunate enough to receive Australia Council funding in 2019, which really was the foundational year for creating what are woven poetic collaborations. So the whakapapa, which is a Maori word for the genealogy or the beginnings of fair trade, really came from several key moments in life. And one of those moments was when I was co-directing the Queensland Poetry Festival. I was sitting in the Tibetan Kitchen with, which is a restaurant on Brunswick Street in Brisbane, sitting there with Ali Kobiekeman waiting for Joy Harjo to arrive from Tulsa. And they say don't meet the people that you most admire. I disagree with that. Meeting Ali and Joy, Ali Kobiekeman and Joy Harjo, was a pivotal moment, and it changed my life, and it really laid the foundations for the Fair Trade Project. Witnessing Ali and Joy conversing and sharing language, sharing energy, sharing words, planted a seed in my mind of this idea of poets, Indigenous poets from Australia and internationally, sharing the screen digitally. And coinciding with all of this was COVID, which, like IsoBreaks, like this fantastic platform, it encouraged us, it nudged us to move towards the screen, to stay connected. I also read a fantastic book by Lana Lepesi called False Divides, which really also spoke about the way Indigenous peoples around the world with COVID turned to the digital platform to stay connected. Because we couldn't go back to our whānaus, because we couldn't go back to our whenua, we stayed connected digitally. So they're just some significant moments that led to this concept of fair trade. As Ravi said, we're grateful to Magabala Publishers, who are one of Australia's most incredible publishers, and owned and run by Indigenous peoples. Bibi Backhouse, who you'll be hearing from later, has an incredible collection coming out with Magabala called More Than These Bones. And yeah, everything that Magabala puts out is a guaranteed good time. That's my hot tip for tonight. So yeah, we're grateful that Magabala will be publishing all of the poems that Fair Trade, the project Fair Trade, has produced. Some examples of some of the poets that have collaborated previously. So I mentioned Joy Harjo and Ali Kobiekeman. Following on from that are people like Tony Birch, who partnered with, his name escapes me, I can't believe it, Simon Ortiz. Sam Wagon Watson partnered with Sigborn Skarden, an incredible Sami poet. Ellen Van Neerven partnered with Layli Long Soldier. Natalie Harkin partnered with Leanne Better Summersoak Simpson. Lorna Munro partnered with January Rogers. Evelyn Araluan partnered with Anahira Gilday. I think that's all so far off the top of my head, but if you check out the Fair Trade page on the Red Room website, you'll be able to see all of the collaborators and listen to and watch the collaborators reading. Part of the outcome of the project is that we asked the collaborators to record their poem so that people can not only read it on the screen but also listen to it and watch it. So it's a real honor and a privilege to have the past, the present, and the future people who are part of Fair Trade, a part of tonight. So Bibi Backhouse and Peter Sapelli, we had a great first Zoom meetup the other week, and yeah, again, started slowly planting some seeds about what they might write about. So you'll be hearing from them. You'll be also hearing from Nadine Anhura, who previously partnered with Alison Whitaker. And for the future person that you'll be hearing from is Cassandra Barnett, who is partnering with Jazz Money later in the year. Jazz wrote an incredible collection published with University of Queensland Press called How to Weave a Basket. And I feel like, Ravi, my time is coming to an end. So I'm going to very quickly ask if I can possibly read the kind of, I mentioned whakapapa earlier, this word. I might actually put that in the public comments so people are familiar with the word. It's a really key word in Te Reo Māori.
Please read it to us.
This is this poem called Story Tree. This is the very first collaborative poem that Ali Cobby-Eckermann and Joy Harjo, everyone knows, was the US Poet Laureate in the US for 3 terms. I feel like she's had 3 terms. And Ali Cobby-Eckermann is a remarkable Indigenous poet here in Australia. Ruby Moonlight is a beautiful collection. This is their poem, and it's a real privilege to read it. It's called Story Tree. Ali, sister, I lay my body down. My mind does not slow for sleep. It has no place to rest, not in this country, this government, this time of heavy turning earth. An eternity can exist in a moment, an hour, or in the song of life of the humble sparrows who mutter as they dream in the tree that breaks through concrete and sorrow of this poem. 5 trains cross the city. The man chased by demons screams out. He roams this area day and night. His bad dreams never stop. They beg our ears for mercy. A ruined goddess dressed in streetlight begs a ghost for change. She wears a crown of cigarette smoke. Tulsa is the corrupted form of our name for town or old town. Down the street, the ashes of the fires we left behind in the forced march were rekindled beneath the council oak tree. It is still there, our story, and the tree who holds it in place, and the memory of fire. The thieving, it never ends. And now the pandemic haunts us Indians, takes us, especially those who are older. In our Muskoki culture, elder is respected. In the swallowing everything up culture, we are death watch. Those viral killers approach my mind to plant fear. They act familiar, they shake hands, they make treaties. They sit down without being invited. We recognize them as part of the great disturbance. I give my mind the task of holding the door open for the ancestors, the guardians, the winds. When I sing, there is no way in for evil. Once in the middle of the country in the early of my life, I drove children through the night in our small pickup truck back from a winter break in Tulsa, north to my education, my way out, and we stopped for gas. Cold winds had blown and blasted us for hours, and snow was drifting the highway. My son jumped out to clean the shield. My baby girl stood up, yawning, and she said, I was just dreaming someone somewhere else, and I wonder if someone somewhere else was dreaming us. Then she went back under the sleep blanket and drifted to where she had come from, to the origin place of poetry, the eternal road between your people and mine, between you and me. We filled up, kept driving through the darkness. And my girl became a dreamer with her beadwork. Her designs emerge from father, mother, ancestor patterns as children and grandchildren play around her. and my sons labour on the railroad, always moving, leaping, agile to the next thought of history on the tracks of living. He worked on each of these trains running through this city, just yards away from this room, as they carry oil, coal, and other extractions from beloved earth, as his daughter takes the path of plant and animal knowledge. Here we are on the verge of shift. We lost 3 culture carriers within days. Others are on ventilators, turning towards the next sacred story. And here I find myself in the night, which is your day, reaching through the eternal wonder, through the mind field of prayers to you. Everything is a prayer, driving, singing, crying, falling down, getting back up. The small animals that we meet on the road, the trees, the beingness, the becoming. You are a prayer, my sister. And this is Ali's response. Dear sister, there are no trains here. The railway lines have been removed and the station house vacant in disrepair. I wait by the broken platform for my son's return. There's no view of him. I no longer know where he lives. Millions of trees are demolished to build the railroad. Now barely a tree survives. You and I know how old trees hold memories. It's tragic these trees have been destroyed. No factual retelling of first contract is encouraged here. No, so much is denied when truth hangs dismal in the air. Miles of empty railway corridors are resown with native seeds, the regeneration saplings, and offer to the native animals and birds, and those who have destroyed what was. Of course, I am excluded. I am no longer flora and fauna. There is no returning. There is no return. Truth is a lonely weight to carry. Your prayer arrives through the silence of dismay, dropping from the talon of an eagle's claw, winged from your window to mine that has flown from your heart. Joy, it is exactly what I need. And truth. Let us sew dresses so we look the same as we walk toward the sun. We will make them together of grasses and winds we find along the river of time, made of smooth stone. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening.
Thank you so much, Ani. And we will hear more from Ani when we have our Q&A. That was wonderful. Those of you that are just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is IsoBreak 21. And we have with us poets representing fair trade in the Red Room Poetry. And our next poet, and I apologize in advance for mispronouncing any Maori words, is Nadine Ann Hura, a creative nonfiction writer and a poet of Nagedi Hina, Nagapuhi, and Pakea Wakapapa. Her essays explore themes of language, biculturalism, identity, and belonging. They've appeared in the spin-off and Tiwai, and she's also a passionate advocate for new and emerging Maori writers and won the 2021 Pikahua Award for Emerging Writer in English. So wonderful to have you with us, Nadine. Thank you so much.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe e Ravi, nau I whakatau I a mātou. No hoki ki a koe e nei, te kai whakahaere o te kaupapa, fair trade. Aku mihi tuatahi kia koutou, ngā iwi take o te ao, tēnā koutou, ki ngā kaituhi, kua tai mai ki te ata toha ngā kupu, ngā toi kupu, tēnā koutou. He uri tēnei no ngā tihine, no Ngāpuhi, ki te tai tokoro, ko Aotearoa te whenua. I'll translate for you. I just thank you. Everybody's disappeared from the screen, so I'm talking to myself, which is very odd. But I just wanted to acknowledge Ravi for the beautiful welcome, and Annie for putting this group together, this event together tonight, and to our other writers. And I also want to acknowledge all the words that will be shared tonight, that have been shared in the past, and also the words that will never be shared. Ravi, you mentioned so poignantly, but also correctly, acknowledging those have been forcefully removed from their land and their languages and their voices and their stories stolen. So I acknowledge all of us here today who are voices in that silence, into that silence, and just acknowledging in particular the poems that were just read that really moved me. I am Nadine Ann Hura, and my ancestors are from the far north of Aotearoa, and I have 3 children. It is 11 p.m. here in Titahi Bay, and I thank you all for listening. It's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege and an honour to be here. And the word whakapapa was used a couple of times. It refers, as Annie said, to genealogy, to ancestry, if you're using an English translation. But when I think of that word, especially if you break it down in Te Reo Māori, and by the way, I'm not a fluent speaker at all. On the learning journey, I grew up speaking English with my mum, who is of English heritage. So it's a real struggle to reclaim our language. But what I do understand of whakapapa is literally about making layers. And we all understand that we are made up of the people who have gone before us, and these are the stories that influence us, and we're also in some way woven into the stories that will come in the future. And so what I wanted to share today, by way of acknowledging, I guess, the connections that I have to this kaupapa, kaupapa being a project, that the beginning place. So we talk about whakapapa as being uncovering the layers and going back to the beginning. And so in preparation for this event, and I'm keeping an eye on the time because I reckon I could actually just keep talking about this, because in anticipation, I went back through my emails to find the beginning, to literally find the beginning place of this connection, my connection in particular to Annie, but also to Cass, who's reading later, who's reading in the future space. And it goes all the way back, bear with me, to the 2nd of May 2019. And I think it's a nice place to start, because it is pre the ISO and pre the need for this virtual connection. It was a different time pre-COVID. And I got an email from Annie. We had just met at a poetry event here in Aotearoa in Wellington. And she thanked me. I won't read the email, it's long. She thanked me and said it was amazing to meet. We're both from the far north. Both of our ancestors are from the far north. We made an instant connection. And she said, when you come to Sydney, this, in a couple of weeks' time it was, I'd love to introduce you to Alison Whitaker. Would you come to her event with me? And I was like, sure, I'd love to. And that was actually my first experience of ever meeting Alison, who was the one that I was eventually matched with in this collaboration. And it's beautiful to look back on this email, because Annie and I were so polite to each other. We just came on before we came on to this event, we were well, let's say we're still polite. We're still polite to each other, but we've become like sisters. So that was back in 2019 that introduction was made. I attended Alison's talk, and I remember what I remember most. I was trying to challenge myself, just remember one thing. I remember that I had a burning question to ask Alison, and I was sitting there in the front row. I was there as part of one of a few Māori writers who had been chosen to go over on a kind of scholarship. And we were all sitting there in the front row, and I had this burning question. I know you want to know the question. I can't remember the question. I didn't ask it. I just remember that it sat there in my chest, and I never asked it. And I didn't know then that I'd get another opportunity. So let's fast forward to December 2019. Alison was coming to Aotearoa to present at the Arts Festival. and this was the 31st of March around about. So you'll remember, if you remember the COVID dates, you know, it was essentially, without going through these 33 messages, Alison was lucky to get back home. And I just want to read you a couple of lines from that email that I sent to Alison when she arrived back home. Alison, so lovely to meet you 2 weeks ago. Was it only 2 weeks ago? The world has changed so much since then. I hope that you are keeping well and safe and secure. And then it goes on. There was a reply from Alison, and she says, it seems like a whole world ago when we met. I'm so grateful to carry this relationship and relationality into such uncertain times. This email, I'll read it because it's funny, ended with me a couple of weeks later or days later saying, what's happening here? Well, on Monday night, or some night, I don't remember, it was lockdown, my 17-year-old son lit a toilet roll on fire because he was bored, and he burnt the carpet and his hand, and he wanted me to thank him for heroically removing the flaming toilet roll at risk to his own person. On Friday morning, I'm jumping ahead, the courier turned up to deliver Indian ink to my 2 teenagers who'd ordered it online with the intention of giving each other tattoos. I woke up this morning and the eldest has a ringworm-shaped tattoo on his hip. I'm just keeping an eye on my time. On a couple of, this is May 2020, I send Alison an email saying I was lying in bed yesterday morning procrastinating when the mail delivered to me right where I was, pajamas and all, this gorgeous book. And the significance of this book is huge, and I won't go into all of it, but it was essentially like a guide for us. My creative partner and I, Anahita Gilday, kia ora, if she's out there listening tonight, we were in the midst of trying to produce a very similar work, and it was a struggle. And about the time that we received this book, we also received a really significant donation from Alison in the form of a koha, we say in Māori, a gift in support of this creating a journal. And this is the journal that Alison helped us ultimately to produce of other Indigenous women, all wahine Māori writers. And I wrote back to her, it is amazing to have this support. I want to be able to explain all the ways it feels significant and affirming, not just your friendship, gangster friendship, actually, I said, but the way that together we're able to resist the colonial power structures that get to decide whose work is valued and whose isn't. And your support helps us retain the balance of power over our processes, and that is everything. And I think that is. And then I go on to say, this koha sits with us for now, but I feel sure that a time will come when it is needed by another group of Indigenous women, and so it will carry on. And I think that's something really beautiful about what we've been talking about and about fair trade, is that, it's always an opportunity to bring someone else with you, which is really just a natural way to collaborate. I'm looking at the time and I'm feeling like I need to speed up, but I just want to jump ahead to July 2021, and this was a period that was really hard for me. My brother actually, he passed away during COVID, during the lockdown, and I wrote a number of essays about that, and Alison reached out to me, and she was just an incredible listener and receiver of what was to be, I think, months and years of grief essays. And then we come ahead to 2021, and Annie very excitedly invites us to be a part of a formal collaboration. And I want to acknowledge Alison for accepting this invitation, even though it came at a period in her life where she was actually seeking to withdraw and do less. We, in one email, talked about how we find ourselves doing more, even though we are consciously trying to do less. And so she accepted the invitation, even though she was consciously trying to move away from publishing, I think. And so I was really grateful. And what followed, like, honestly, this is what Annie and I were laughing about before we came on, is that there are 17 messages in this thread of emails and 30 in this thread of emails where we literally are just like, look, I'll give you a little bit of a taster. Wednesday 11th is good, anytime between an 11 and 12. Oh, I just got your auto reply. Can we do the 9th or the 10th or the 11th? Works absolutely perfect for me. Awesome, it's going to happen. If there's anything else, I'll cancel it. Oops, sorry, I missed it. I'm really sorry. Can we try 11 a.m.? I can't. I'm on a due on the picket line today at 12. I'll see you all in 5 minutes. Oh no, that's Australian time. Can we schedule to next week? I'm so sorry I caused the confusion. So you get the idea. I'm going to read you now to close just some snippets from the poem that we did actually complete. So I say to Alison, this is our last, I'm going to read 3 small snippets. This is published on the Red Room Poetry. It's a whole letter, and I write this to Alison at the end of our poem. And she replies, so this is my email to her. I said, I'm so grateful to you. You cast out those first lines and invited me to pick them up. And after that, the poem wrote itself. So I suppose my primary reflection is this: sometimes we can't do it on our own. Sometimes we need someone else to show us where to begin. The image of the solitary writer is as colonial as a white man on a plinth and just as immovable. But I don't think that's how we are naturally inclined to create. It makes you wonder how many Indigenous women before us have aged into silence, how many poems have never been written because there was no one out there to cast the rope and no one to pick up. And Alison replies, and this is just a snippet, this non-poem was a relational practice between us, one that was humbled in the best way once we understood that sometimes Indigenous writing, our writing, must sit under the shadow of survivance or even the shadow of keeping life going, ours and others. And having sat in that window, something weird and vivid and defiant could happen. You must not age into silence. In this process, I have heard so clearly, shot over the barriers between us, the loud, precise, explosive voice in your chest. It sticks to the beautiful. So beautiful. I'm going to read you the first 4 lines of the poem, and if you would like to read it, and I hope you do, please go and find it. It came under a title, Nothing Can Stop Us Now. That was the name of our WhatsApp thread. But in fact, a lot of things did stop us. This is a poem about how we couldn't write the poem. We talk in the comments about how we couldn't write the poem. We find tiny pockets of time to explain how we couldn't write the poem. We set up a WhatsApp group called Nothing Can Stop Us to explain why we can't write the poem. We send emails about why we can't write the poem, and then we realize we have written the poem. Thank you so much to Annie, and thank you to everyone coming tonight. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Nadine. Terrific. We will hear from Nadine more in a second. Welcome, everyone. Those of you who are just joining us, I'm Ravi Shankar. This is, of course, IsoBreak. And those of you that are interested, you can find actually all of the old IsoBreaks are archived on YouTube and online. And you can see them at the AP Writers website. If you're not a member, I encourage you. Right now, there's the big American Writing Conference taking place, the AWP. And I always think of APWT as kind of a smaller, kinder, more intimate gathering. And there's a conference that's going to happen every couple of years in a different Asian country, Asia Pacific country, and then writing retreats and publishing opportunities in a way to kind of spread the word about many writers who might not get the attention otherwise. So it's been my pleasure to be in service with APWT all of this time. And so let us keep going. Next up, we have the wonderful Baby Beckhouse, a descendant of the Bardi Jawa people of the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia. You might notice, one common thread is that all of our performers today are multi-talented. They can do different things from weaving to music. And so Bebe is not only an award-winning writer and a creative leader, but also a classical pianist and a composer. He's been a producer and a director of theater, festivals, public art projects across Australia, including international dance and theater projects in New Zealand, France, and Belgium. He's also a leader in designing and delivering high-profile programs for Australia's diverse communities. And he has successfully fostered many opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander creatives to showcase their work in mainstream platforms. A writer, poet, illustrator, speaker, and facilitator living on the unceded land of the Kulin peoples. And we'll hear a little bit of Bebe's work, which encompasses love, loss, identity, Aboriginal and gay existence, place, and country. So thank you so much for being with us, Bebe. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Gunyangan maganda, bade nganma. Gala mabu rubibi mabulian. I am a descendant of the Bardi-Jawi people. We are the custodians of the land, water, sky, and islands of the Dampier Peninsula in far northwestern Australia. I live here on the unceded land of the Kulin people. I'm acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. They are the traditional owners and custodians of the land that I live on. And I'm really excited to be a part of this project of fair trade. It's exciting to know that there is an intentional and deliberate sharing of language, culture, words, voices between different First Nations peoples. And, you know, in Australia, before colonization, we had over 250 Aboriginal languages. And of course, since colonization, now only around 60 of those languages are considered healthy and alive. And I'm grateful, and it kind of pains me and hurts to say this, but I'm grateful that my language is one of the ones that are alive, and that I can continue the legacy and the existence of my people and speak my language and share my culture and embody it and be it through my existence as Bardi-Jawi. I'm going to read 3 short pieces. My debut collection has been mentioned. It is called More Than These Bones, and it's been a long time in the making. Annie can speak to that. But I'm very excited. It's now out in the world, and it's a surreal thing to feel. But More Than These Bones is a collection of letters and dedications and captures of moments throughout different relationships that I've had in my life, and how they have helped to shape me and to come to know myself. So this first one is called When the Sky is Dark. I'll pick you up later when the sky is dark, when there are fewer people on the streets and less thoughts on your mind. I prefer to know you when she's not around. You always seem happier when you're alone. I drive 120 straight down the M80, along the Western Ring past Essendon Fields, and I weave through traffic pretending my car and the lines are my fingers in your hair. Oil stains and asphalt, pine trees and eucalyptus, the suburbs change as the skyline fades from my place to yours. There's no difference between us except for the lies we tell. Our timing is everything, and this time is no different. The only reality we'll ever need is the measuring cup filled with the nights we spend together, not those we don't. The headlights from the cars flicker between yellow and orange, then crystal and blue, like the flowers you sent me on my birthday, still sitting in my kitchen, pressed between books, out of sight from anyone who sits at my table. I'll pick you up later when the roads are empty. We can go to the drive-through cinema or the park by the creek, but only meet me when the suburbs are quiet and the sky is dark, close to midnight when she's asleep. That was a little context. That was a piece that I had written for a former lover of mine. And we had a very secret relationship for many different reasons, but it was a very intimate dedication to him. And speaking of intimacy, one of the most intimate and deep relationships that I've ever had in my life was with my grandmother. She was the person who handed me my culture, my language, my identity. And she was one of the brave souls who raised me in many different ways. So this is one of my many, many, many dedications to her death. And it's called Grief is a Terrible Dinner Guest. Losing her was a strange thing. Grief broke me, left me incapacitated. The belief there was no future, only a past capturing empty dinner plates and cups stained with watermarks. No more late night talks over Winfield and Makona, questioning who my new boyfriend might be now the former had left me. No more drives down Linlithgow and Victoria, diamond rings clutching a black handbag and oversized sunglasses, picking dripped chocolate from knee-length pants. One night, I fell asleep, and while I dreamed, grief decided it didn't want to stay any longer. Clear vision blurred, like a fogged windscreen through the rain. No day the same again. Just broken thoughts reflected on roads and oil stains. The mantra on Russell, tram stop 10 on Swanston. Just memories that appear to be fragments of someone else's life I read about once on a bench in Thornbury Park. And the final piece I'll read to you is the title piece from my book, More Than These Bones, which I'll show you here. This is it. This is my baby. And yes, this is the first kind of in-depth exploration, internal exploration I had with myself. And it was one of the last pieces to kind of be tweaked in the book. And Annie, I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about here, but this one is called More Than These Bones. No need to forever be searching for something or someone, to hold on to tightly with both of my hands, a life full of seemingly wrong choices made, apparently wrong paths walked, and supposed time wasted. Looking and trying and searching while defining and finding myself. Discovering a path of possibility which never seemed to have an end. 2 feet constantly gripping soft dirt to find their place on the earth. Hoping to build the trust in myself to prove I have what it takes to be myself. And to accept who I truly am without hesitation or justification. To always stand tall with an upright back for everything I believe in. No need to ever walk in someone else's faded footsteps. No need to ever manipulate my gait to fit the stride of someone who went before me, to push on and on in the wilderness of the rest of my 30s and forge my own path. Always listening to the uneven beat of my heart, feeling the blood feeding the creases of my fingers and toes, connecting my magnetic mind to every single cell as they race each other through my veins, searching for traces of spirit to paint the portrait of my genesis, to listen to each and every word I feel the need to speak, to find freedom and liberty from the ropes and chains I bound to myself as a child, to live in a world where a dream is born on a summer pillow and it shows me happiness was never about you, always about me. Looking up at the endless cotton sheet sky and searching for silhouettes of birds, following them in foolish dance steps from here to wherever they go, staying on course with courage, mustered from the pit of my stomach, running towards the whereabouts of my vista, and one day meeting the sun, staring deeply into my own soul from the windows of my blinders, to a depth where my body collapses inward, so I find myself at the very beginning, the birth of this galaxy and the universe which safely cradles it, seeing things for what they truly are in boldness and grace, not what I once perceived them to be, knowing I'm more than what they say I am. I'm more than this body. I'm more than this skin, more than these bones. Thank you, Ravi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Baby. And I put a link to Baby's book in the comments. I encourage you to pick it up. Welcome, everyone. We're about halfway through. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is IsoBreak, a collaboration between the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop. I should just say about the New York Writers Workshop that there is actually an immersive writing retreat taking place in Mexico. If anyone is interested, APWT members get a discount, but this is from May 21st to May 28th in Mexico City, and then in the Yucatan from May 28th to June 2nd. A chance to work with some really wonderful international faculty, and you can find out more at the New York Writers Workshop website. So we're halfway through. What a wonderful way. It's the early morning for me to hear all of these voices and stories is just a fabulous way to begin my day. So next up, we have the fabulous Peter Cepelli. He's got more than 2 decades of expertise in using and managing advocacy through artistic expression. He's the arts manager and supporter of the spoken word arts movement in Fiji, and he founded the poetry shop Fiji in 2013. So I guess a decade anniversary coming up. A poetry collective that facilitates regular poetry events in Suva and poetry circle discussions with new and emerging Fijian writers. Peter is also the co-founder of the Center for Arts Suva, a new community art center framed to create space for new emerging art forms and artists. He also works as a gay activist. He uses storytelling as advocacy, and he was one of the speakers of the inaugural TEDx Suva. He's passionate about developing the literary arts in Fiji, and he's a slam poet with a large following and a champion of the revival of the literary movement in Fiji, working to provide spaces for new and emerging poets and artists to enable the framing of their local authentic voices. He lives in Suva with his partner, Mark, and their 2 cats, Friday and Nala. So thank you so much, Peter. It's really wonderful to have you here with us. Oh, you're muted, I think. Oh, Peter, you're muted.
No,
Peter.
my mic was muted.
Yes.
I'm back.
Yeah. You're back.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, last year in June, I was in Brisbane for the Writers' Festival, and I met Ani, and I think what I remember is her saying, you know, this earnest to kind of like, we must find a thread to work together, and this is one of those threads. I think I'm speaking to you all from Suva. I'm here in Suva Point. It's just like 50 minutes out of the city in Suva, and this place wasn't here before. This place is completely reclaimed. It was reclaimed in the early 50s when the New Zealand Air Force came to do training, and they set up around the corner, and this place was all kind of reclaimed for their operations. The story I tell of Suva is that the city was kind of, dreamt up in about 1875. But the story I want to center on is the people of Suva, who'd lived here for over 2,500 years, was moved by the colonial government because to make space for the city. And if you look at the records, all they talked about was just people moving, and there were no pictures and there are no stories. And I think for me, like recently, I've been thinking about like, what did that move look like? How long did it take? Was it like one foul swoop? Did people just go there? And I've been thinking about that, the story of place. And I wondered, like, I want to visit it in poetry and also just find other people that, other artists in Suva that's willing to tell that story. what I will read today is, I wrote an anthology for my father when he passed, because we didn't really have a relationship. When he passed, I realized how broken we were, how much there was so many things unsaid. And I thought I'd write an anthology to kind of close that relationship. And so this is the second part of the anthology. The first was called Maps of the Ancestors. This is called The Sleeping Ancestors. And so all of these texts for him are written in a kind of prayer. And there's 4 parts to this piece. I think I will just begin. And each part is titled. So, Unclothed. Take these recycled prayers, take them in your trembling hands and push them back into the temple of your mouth. Grind these brittle verses against your teeth and feel their sharp claws press against your sacred tongue. These are not for us. These prayers are not tethered to this place. Its clawed fist shifts in cyclonic turmoil that never finds the shape of sleep. Spit it out into the sands and let the ceaseless tides take it into the blue. Drag it across knifed coral edges and stretch it wide between the waves and send it back to shore with melodies sung in a wordless new song. Take off those uniforms, unshirt your coated frame, unlace those boots, unhook your medallions and place your awards and steel books at the teeth of the river. Bring yourself here. Your brown as true as your mother's promise, and your stride proud like the backs of your fathers, the backs that bent the winds. And those hands, the same hands that planted those first seeds, the same bodies that journeyed 1,000 pathways across liquid landscapes, an earth pregnant with the promise of harvests, of sons and of daughters, fluent in the language of birds and of trees, with the ocean in us. Waves crashing against our bellies, our blood inked with stories of us and in us, and our gods etched on our fingernails and sitting on the kiss of our smiles. Bring yourself here. Us. This blue ocean with its shape-shifting islands and its peninsulas sighing against the heaving belly of sky. Earth's harvest of sleep and its violent dreams pressing against these mountains and plains and plateaus and sharp-toothed watery edges with heaving rivers bleeding into the limbs of our lands. Born inside the womb of this warm earth and birthed by rivers of fire older than memory, once revealed, we knew its name. We know its rhythm and its corners. We know its leaf skin and the poetry of its language. It came tethered to form and memory, to the celestial parts in these bodies. Our histories of ancestries and genealogies, of songs and of stories, of voyages and discoveries, untold in straight lines, sung the language of brown earth, told in forgotten dialects, of the old who lay dormant in these new bodies. Within the circle of time, the past before us, we know its landscape, we know its borders, our ways of knowings painted on our hands and marked on our tongues. We know its ghosts, and we know the vast forests of our dead, the future behind us, a mystery, a place that is blessed with salted hope, a place without sound. Waves crash in circular motion, in cosmic rhythms and in resonating songs, and we at the center, ever present. Our bodies we carry are libraries with our ancestors sleeping on our tongues and their spirits folded carefully in our bellies. Sacred root, the poetry of treed skies, of places unpeopled where the voices of hooved beasts press against the chorus of winged creatures, where people swim on the fins of shark gods with a curtain between walls within. When our bodies knew the music of brown earth, of roots leaking transmissions into rocks and pebbles and surrounding bush, where sacred root that brought us here by the spirits lay sleeping on the forest floors, bound on our tongues, sung from the libraries of our mothers' bellies, whose lullabies mark our memories and lay sitting on our skin. Storied songs and movement in the shape of sacred prayers carried on the insides of our mouths and marked in the cups of our hands tell us of the women that carry the sacred root inside of them, of the sacred child whose place of rest nurtured these first fruits, showed unto us the wisdom of these rats. And from beast to man, we began to know the enchantment of these roots and vines that open new pathways in dialects of dreams and prophecies. And once our bodies knew its magic, it became part of our ways. It became central to our knowing. These rooted vines brought with them the call from other things in other places and showed us new movement in the shape of clouds and waves crashing against the celestial skin of the night sky. Like the cords of our mothers and the thread and the broad shoulders of the four women, this brown potion from the crushed roots pushed us over into the well of dreams, into the other place. When we drink, we wait. We wait for a sounded feeling. Some call it many names: Kava, Ava, Yangona. These are the names we clothe it in. I'm so sorry, I'm gonna have to stop.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Cassandra tēnei, he iri ahau no raukaua ki wharepuhunga. I'm hoping that you can all hear me because unfortunately, Ravi, I couldn't hear you, but I think you've just introduced me. So it's so amazing to be here, and I just want to mihi to you, Ravi, and to you, Ani, for creating this opportunity and this space for us all. And it's a real honor to be here and to go last, I believe. And so I'm going to be collaborating with Jazz Money, and it's such an honor. And we're at the very beginning of our partnership. Like, we haven't actually had a meeting yet, although I've met Jazz at Brisbane Writers Festival and briefly in a maybe a Zoom sometime before that, another online festival during COVID. And of course, I've read her beautiful book, which is How to Make a Basket. It's a really amazing book. It's full of materiality and texture and color and mineral and love. It's beautiful and full of space. It's spacious and quite light and delicate. I love it. And so just beginning to think about how to begin thinking about this collaboration and reading Jaz's book, and also just a bit of context. I've just moved home to my own whenua, my own land, which is the Waikato region of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I live in Aotearoa, but I've been living on other territories, and I've just moved back to the territory of Tainui of my own waka, the Kanua people arrived by. And we have a magnificent river called the Waikato that our whole region is named after. And it's amazing to be back on my river. And I've had the river on my mind, and then we've had floods and storms recently, and the river just rose up and asserted herself amazingly and scarily, terrifyingly. And so I've been feeling the strength of my river. And as I went reading through Jaz's book, I found a poem about a river that really spoke to me. And so it put me in mind of rivers, because I also wrote a piece many years ago about a river that's not mine by any stretch. It's a river in Korea. And I was invited to collaborate or respond to the artworks of a friend who'd gone to Korea and photographed this river called Cheongyecheon. And I did, and I wrote in the voice of that river, and I don't know how I feel about that now. I mean, it feels a bit wrong to me now to have done that, but we learn from our mistakes. And I thought I'd just go back and read a tiny bit from my early piece, it's 2008 or so, and then read you from Jaz's poem about the river and go from there. So I feel like I'd like to show you, if I can, it's hard with the camera, there's some photos that were taken of the river by my friend Fiona Amundsen. So it's an urban tributary, and I'll just read you a little bit from the end of this long prose piece that I wrote, just a tiny bit. So, having nowhere to go, we join forces with the rain, the summer, the monsoons, the river Hun, the yellow sea. We rise up, pouring their excretions back in through their windows, giving back their gifts and taking others, taking their gardens, taking their huts, taking their little feet for keeps. Again and again we escape our walls. Again and again we, the rain, the summer, the monsoon, the river, the sea, we rise up, offering permanent passage to all. So that's a tiny bit from that piece that goes through some centuries of the Cheongyecheon. And now with this idea of the personhood of rivers in mind, I want to read to you from Jaz's beautiful poem called Billa, a River Cycle. It's a long poem, so I'm just going to read a section or three. What became of the river who rose up and called themselves human, stepped upon the land containing the memories of snowmelt and wellspring, smooth-worn stones along their ribs, and with water curiosity sought to know more about the humans on the land whose invasion of the waters choked the river. Billa never sleeps, for forwards, for foreverness, for flow and gift, and on, and yet had become stagnant with cruel touch and non-touch and toxic intervention. Dams rose where new humans demand, and irrigation sucks dry, to nourish not the plants of this land, but those with poisonous intent. Yes, the pesticides, and all those carried in canola yellow plastics. In turn, run this and that towards sweet water, and so Billa is transformed to the one you see today. Here, la, look, la. to water not clear with flow and laughing bodies, small mouths and delicate fronds, but a sludge of gasping fish, carp muck, cow shit. Don't drink from here no more, no good. And when rain returns, a moving sick comes across the land. But a river is always a river, eh? Even when submerged, even dispelled, even poisoned or damned. Because spirits walk this land, and ancestors placed Billa just so, with cause, of course. Ngaradan watched. Bilby and Gurilang and Dingu watched. Even Bunyip Wawi had not seen rivers walk upon 2 feet in this world. Such a lovely poem. And I just, from there, found myself thinking about Atua, which is our Māori word for the gods that are the forests, the seas, the oceans, the skies, and thinking about the ways over the years since my early river piece, the ways I've been thinking about how to step into and inhabit and write for these various entities and atua and parts of nature that so need to be given voice. And yet it's such a dangerous kind of undertaking as well. And it's murky. And then when you move that into human realms and giving voice to humans, especially humans that aren't yourself, that's murky too. And I think about this a lot. It's one of my main kind of poetic interests. And so I thought I'd leap forward to more recent poems. I was lucky enough to do a residency last year in Waitakere, West Auckland, so a territory, an area of Aotearoa, also not mine, but I did grow up there, so I have quite a strong love for that land. I was lucky enough to go back there, and while I was there, I started again thinking about how to write these non-human beings, living beings, and I started to think about the insects that are the kaitiaki, the caretakers of the forest, and like one particular old story of ours, old Pūrākau Māori, about a character called Rata, and he tries to chop a tree down for a canoe, but every night all the insects put the tree back up because he hasn't been saying the right karakia, the right prayers. And I was thinking about how insects in that story do speak, and that perhaps they are creatures it's okay to give voice to. I don't know the answer to that, but I went ahead and wrote a poem, or wrote several poems, thinking about insect voices and thinking about how to write in English when I imagine their voices to be Māori, but I don't have the real Māori to be able to write them in Māori. So I wrote this poem that I'm going to read to you called Variculala, which is about the cabbage tree moth. Boils the cabbage, chew it, spit it, dig, pound, soak, and no, she chop can't kill it. Cabbage is a liver, cabbage, home. Cabbage, mover, moves unseen, like us, we like. Chew it, hole it, spit it, hide in leaf, sprouting, striping, ravage, hide. Unseen by they, die leaf, live tree, a move, rooting, fooding, and reach, but not by she. Once rooting, brewing, sweeting, weaving, wading, we and tree, and reading she. And so I think you can probably hear that as I worry about language, I think about sound. I think about sound in the way that when the meanings begin to blur from one language to another, sound remains. And so another thing I wrote during my residency was chants, because I felt the need to connect again with the forest through chants, through these kind of incantations. But I was making my own up because, you know, if you don't have the actual thing to hand, what can you do but make it up? And I was working across the languages again. So I thought I'll finish by reading a chant or two. as offerings into the spirit of exchange. This is called Chant to Avert Extinction. And it's thinking especially of the tui. It's a bird I wrote about several times, but mainly about sound. Befell the thrifty tui here, phonography unbroken here, a fifth eye open, elevate, thrift out a fallen reading ear, forever, forever, ever, and thrift and fall, and thrift and fall, fifth eye, fifth eye, fifth eye, fifth eye, ever redden, phono, no phono, no phono. If fallen, 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 turn, foreign find, foreign learn, and thrift and fiddle, fall, thrift, fall. So that was a chant written entirely in English, but I was really using some rhythms and sounds from Māori. So it's a little bit sort of impenetrable and unlanguaged. And then I'm just going to finish with one more very short little chant. This one was to placate Taniwha, or Kaitiaki, guardian spirits. And it's maybe even a little bit more, the language is that much more broken down. Okay. Befell te thrift, e tu e, kua whara te omata, e tu e whiroia te ograph, e ngā thrift, e ngā fall, whatu, whata, e tu e tahi, rua, toru, whā, hio e hi. Kia ora koutou. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. And I think I was on mute before, so let me just tell you who you just heard from, the wonderful Cass Barnett, who's a writer across worlds. I love this, a language unlearner, an avid reader, and a Rio dreamer. And her chapbook, How, came out in 2021. It's I mentioned that we're kind of multi-dimensional and vastly talented group here. And so this is truly a multimedia text with artworks by the author and audio as well. She's performed this in 2 voices at the Brisbane Writers Festival, performed with a roots funk band, and shared Off Limits Words Underground at the offline invite-only Night of Untold Stories. She's also been the Auckland Regional Parks Artist in Resident last year and has poetry in a number of places, including No Other Place to Stand, Cordite, Brief, Landfall, and Black Marks on the White Page. And what a wonderful reading. Thank you so much, Cassandra. So I'm actually going to bring everyone back on screen. Thank you all for being here. I'm Ravi Shankar, and this has been IsoBreak. Actually, before we do that, I see that Peter is back on, and he kind of got truncated. So I'm going to just bring Peter back on in case he wanted to share any last words with us, and then we can hear from everyone. Okay, Peter, I think you're back, and you got kind of cut off mid-screen. So, no worries.
My laptop died. I just really wanted to say, as part of the introduction, but I think I was kind of steamrolling towards the reading, that this opportunity, us in the Pacific, we rarely kind of work with New Zealand literary spaces or Australia. And so, I mean, I have been, I think I've been to many of the Salon du Livre, the French book festivals in Tahiti and Namur, and then the big one up in Paris. But the invitation last year to the Brisbane Writers Festival really opened up this space, because that's how I met Ani. And then, then got to know more work of Indigenous people from Australia. And so I think, being part of this space is great, because I think it opens up this kind of windows into the, I think in here in the region. So I think that's quite brilliant. That's really all I wanted to add to the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. And I'm going to add everyone back into our stream here. I don't know where Bebe went. Oh, Bebe just had to log
I
off.
think he's just.
Okay. Well, maybe he will come back. But let me just, the other thing I had mentioned, and I just want to share with you is this link to Fair Trade, which you can see at Red Room Poetry Projects.Fair Trade. And I thought this might be a place for us to begin our conversation. I love this idea that fair trade is a way to reorder, reimagine, and recode the world. And I think that there's going to be a book, right, Ani, of all of the collaborations and a kind of like something to do with weaving. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Exactly, Ravi. Yeah, the thing to do with weaving is that it's going to be called Woven. So the title of the collection will be Woven, and all of the poems that all of the collaborators have written will be included in this beautiful collection. So that'll be coming out in 2023. Peter, I don't think I've told you yet, so sorry. Hope that's good news.
That's great news. Thank you.
And in our comments, it was saying that you're the perfect matchmaker, Ani. So do you want to tell us how did you go about kind of pairing people up?
Good question.
Through my puku, through my gut, through my heart, through my blood, through my bones, through listening, watching. I think we're all, poets. We're great observers. We just are able to tune in. I'm sure you can all, Ravi, you'd be able to just go, oh, you should work with da-da-da. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And Peter, Nadine, and Cass, you'd all be like, oh, I can hear that voice. And I feel like it's just part of our trade. It's part of who we are. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we have an intuitive sense, and you've brought together such amazing people. And I want to hear from everyone. And maybe, what great stories and languages that we listen to. And maybe, Nadine, do you want to talk a little bit? You mentioned that I thought your Maori was beautiful, but that it's something that came to you kind of later in life. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about kind of reclaiming your ancestry and your language? How did that happen?
Well, it's still happening. It's ongoing. Some days, and Cass will relate to this because we talk about this a lot. Some days you stand up and it just flows. And never, I'm not fluent, but you don't stop yourself. You can let yourself, your brain is reaching for the words and they're there. And then other days you can't even, you stand up and you're like, I've forgotten my mountain. It's really strange. And I speak Spanish, and so from a student exchange that I did when I was 18, and then I lived in South America for many years, so I can't get away with saying I can't, my brain can't do it, because I know that my brain is capable. So I think as much as anything, it's within yourself. And there's this word in Māori called, it's whakamā, means, it's translated as shame. And people mention it's, weirdly enough, people who don't even speak Māori usually know that word, usually know, because everybody carries it, the sense of shame that you don't have the language. But when I did a little bit like Cass, loving sort of researching what words really mean, whakamā, as I came to understand it and was taught to me, is that it's about making something visible. The whakamā means to make something visible. And so when I think about that word now, I think that, and if you stand and you feel, like a rising sense of, your heart beats fast, like don't make a mistake, or you feel embarrassed, I feel like that you are making visible the pain and the theft of your language. I think that shame is not my shame, it is the shame. You are making visible the shame of that theft. And so, yeah, it's just ongoing. I did enroll, to answer your question more directly, I enrolled in a total immersion. You can do total immersion here for 1 year. And I did that, and I came out, you know, being able to give a 40-minute, you know, recited talk. I think I did my talk about knitting randomly, but you know, I couldn't really have a conversation. You know, I couldn't really relax. So it's been a journey, and I'm still on it, and I love that writing is an access point for me. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
By the way, can I just say, Annie is special at what she does. She's understanding herself. Not everybody can do what she does. She is a weaver of people, and that's how she brings people together so beautifully.
Totally agree. Peter, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to just respond to Nadine. The same thing here. Like, I don't speak. So I speak. There's many dialects in Fiji. So I speak the dialect that's spoken on this island, which is the normal dialect everybody speaks. So I don't speak the dialect from my dad's village, and my mother being Samoan, we were raised speaking Samoan, but English was the language. And in Fijian, the word is susumandre. When you're susumandre, it means you're raised on bread. It means that you're raised without culture, without language. And for me, like, you know, like for the longest time, I carried the thing with shame. And the thinking now, and I think something Bibi and I will kind of expand on, is to think that, yes, I was raised on bread, but I have a hybrid kind of culture. You know, like I don't have the, like, I can't go to the village and openly. I can't do a kava ceremony, but I'm an urban Fijian islander, and I'm not special. There's many people like me without language, and maybe we needed to find some agency inside this kind of shaming. And you know, and yes, every time I travel, there's this kind of, whenever people ask me, Peter, do you write in Fijian? And I get hit with that same shame again, to say, like, I'm really sorry, I don't. And I should stop making excuses and study learn is what I should do. But yeah, it resonated with me when you were talking. So,
and is that Cass kind of what you meant by being a language unlearner and a Rio dreamer? Can you tell us about that? I was so struck by those elements in your bio, and I think, you know, hearing your voice, I could kind of get a sense of that, of the sonic qualities of what you were talking about. But what do you mean by that? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
That idea of being raised on bread is so interesting, and I feel like that's me too, but at the same time I got such a sort of deep Pākehā European education, you know, with like Western philosophy and all that stuff, that I feel like it's not bread, it's more than bread. Like, I got layered up thick with all of this knowledge that proved to be unhelpful when it came to reconnecting with my Indigenous culture. And so I need to unlearn that. And it's really like thick around me. And it's like always trying to peel off layers to get to a place where I can more directly relate with my own land and people and other whakapapa, my other ancestries, my tūpuna. Yeah, so there's an unlearning, and then reo, which is reo Māori, the Māori language. Well, I dream of speaking it, and I feel like there is a way in which, when we can't speak it, the wairua and the kinds of knowledge that it holds still can come to us in dreams, you know, whether they're daytime dreams or nighttime dreams, but there are ways those things still pass through us. And that's what I've got to hold on to while I'm trying to kind of break down the brick wall that got built with all that other knowledge.
Yeah, beautiful.
Ravi, I really love that Cass just used the word wairua. Cass, just share a bit about that.
I feel like I want Nadine to do an etymology.
Yeah.
You could do that too, Cass. Yeah. I'm sure you've probably done it more than me, deeper than me.
I know that Peter will probably have a word too. There might be.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of simplest and most common translation would be spirit. Wairua, But yeah, I know there is a whole thing there about two waters, but it's escaping me now. Nadine, can you expand?
Well, I mean, when I think about Wairua, I have actually, and I don't know who else might be listening to this, but who, you know, language exponents. This is the other thing, is that we get very careful when we're talking about language, as though presenting that we might be experts on the subject. But I think it's pretty clear that we're learners and enthusiastic and passionate about te reo. But I think when I think about Wairua, and it refers to the realms beyond what we can touch and see and taste. It refers to everything that we know innately within us and can feel. So people often use that word to talk about the connections, particularly between those who have passed, who have gone beyond the veil. I'm sure that I've heard it described to me. It's definitely refers to water, and of course we are made up of water, and roto means lake, which is the inside, and rua, I have heard this, but it feels like it's something outside as well. So that this is the opposite. Have you heard that, Cass?
Yeah, that's ringing a bell. Yeah.
And but I think one thing that where this conversation, and picking up on something you said, Peter, about you know, I should you know, I feel often I'm like, you know, no, this is terrible. I will prioritize like knitting and sewing and doing my art and creative stuff rather than studying, you know, all my day. It's filled with all my language books, and I think about that sometimes, and I feel like it's actually not political. It's political. Your ability to be able to even study, you know, to go to classes. It's very difficult in New Zealand to even get into a real class. You can line up, put your name down, and take ages to even get in because the revitalization of our language is so, you know, it's so popular now, and it's awesome, and we should be so glad for that because our ancestors fought so hard for that. But what it means is that it can be hard for you to get into a class. I'm a solo mum with 3 kids, and so I should study at home, and I don't because I do other things and I'm writing. You know, so like I have aroha for us inside the struggle, heaps of love for us inside that struggle to reclaim, and I love the idea that we can continue to have our language in our dream space.
Yes, a little comment from Menka viewing. She says, someone trying to connect with her Sindhi heritage, the conversation really resonates. And certainly for me as well, my mother tongue is Tamil, and the language I grew up speaking, a beautiful language. And as soon as I was in American schools, I was teased and I felt the shame for this language that wasn't understood by my American peers. And it estranged me from what was deeply in my bloodstream. And so, you know, and I want to ask you, Ani, because I was just recently in Australia. I was in in Cairns, and I taught
in Cairns.
Cairns. How do you pronounce it? Cairns. Very American twang. But I taught a workshop at the Lotus Glen Correctional Facility, and 100% of the students were Indigenous. I also teach at a correctional facility here in Massachusetts. Teach a class on memoir, and 100% of my students are men of color. And so that was just such a sparkling mirroring of the ways in which colonialism has used the same practices across the country. So I'm kind of curious, how are things in Australia with respect to that, with respect to kind of Indigenous rights and feeling like you're gaining equal footing? And then totally separately, I'm also very interested in your weaving practice and how your weaving practice kind of coincides and connects with your writing practice, because I see a very deep connection.
I really am. That's so beautiful and such a generous question, Ravi. But I do, if it's okay, I do want to just quickly loop back to Peter. You had something really vital you wanted to say about Wairua, Peter.
Oh, no. I was, my brain was working. No. And around language, no. I think I wanted to just respond very quickly to Nadine. there's this incredible writer. He's in his 80s. He's of Indian origin, from Fiji. His name is Subramani. Subramani wrote one book in English in the 70s, and after that, he only wrote in Fiji Hindi. And he said, we think in language. And so for him, he couldn't write in English because he didn't think in English. And so, because my question was like, why did you stop writing in English? He said, because I don't think in the language. I was translating each time. And I think, you know, I wanted to just quickly respond to Nadine, but I actually don't have any response to way to.
Beautiful.
I'm sorry.
We think in language. I've just written that down, and it just Ravi's story about feeling ostracized and that sense of, you know, your mother tongue being kind of, it sounds dramatic, but burned out of you, like being I think that's a really broader, vital conversation to have. Colonization, eh? Where were you born, Ravi?
I was actually born here in Washington, D.C., but I went back and forth, and when I was quite young, around 9 years old, my grandmother got sick, and so we moved back to South India, and I lived there for a year and a half or so, right in the middle of my childhood.
Yeah, that would have been seriously profound. Like that would have, that imprint. Yeah. Just to loop back to your really profound question about you working with people who are incarcerated. One of the hats I wear is working at a place called Wayside Chapel, and I teach poetry to homeless people in mob space. And mob space is essentially dedicated to Indigenous peoples. And it's a gift. Did you find that, Ravi, working with, working in these spaces, it was, it transcended something. The privilege of being able to hear people's stories and knowing that these people wouldn't, you were the receiver of these stories is a very profound moment. And not being Indigenous to these lands, I don't really want to. I mean, Alison Whittaker, Nadine's incredible poetic collaborator, is also a lawyer. Hey, Nadine. And one of the lines in the poem, I couldn't write the poem because I had to. What was it?
I can't remember exactly, but she was. No, she couldn't make one of our meetings because she had to pick it. But one of the lines in the poem was around her shoes, wearing inappropriate shoes to a protest march. No, she is. It was a real privilege to work with her. She wields words so easily. Well, I'm sure they're not easy, but it seems to me, you know, that effortlessness that comes with poetry, and you're like, oh, anybody can write poetry. And then, of course, not everybody can write poetry. But that is the mark of a true, brilliant poet, I think, is that they make you believe that it's that simple. Like that line, truth is a lonely weight to carry, you know? Gorgeous.
Yes, you're so right. And I also really love that Fair Trade is giving a platform. Can you hear, Ravi, these incredible voices that the intention, the very intentionality behind Fair Trade is to platform Indigenous voices specifically. And there's something about that. A lot of festival these days are naturally putting, rather than having a dedicated Indigenous session, you know, we'll go and listen to the Indigenous poets at this time. And that's kind of shifting now to Indigenous voices are being just a part of. It's a given that Indigenous voices are prioritized and programmed in festivals. And I think Cass and Nadine would probably have a lot to do.
I was actually just wanting to say that, you know, the opportunity to collaborate with other artists away from any requirement to produce you know, work for publication, because that so often is part of the deal, feels like a performance. It feels like a negotiated performance. And when you want to start like with a focus on making a connection, building another layer, when it's about a relational exchange, it's about reciprocity, it's about healing, it's about vulnerability. You know, this is what this collaboration really invited. And on top of all of that, we had so much fun. Like, if you watch our video, and please don't, we were totally going to record it again, but then once it was done, I was like, can't be bothered. Done it, you know, we did it. So we were busy, because we're always busy, and we had this like 40 minutes, and I was driving along the highway, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pull off. You ready now? You know, kind of thing. Pulled off the highway. It was like 40 degrees in the car. That's hot for here. And I was sweating. And Alison stayed off cam. She didn't want to record with her face. I was like, sweet, I didn't really think about it. So she hits record, and I'm on my phone, and I'm reading off my poem. Didn't know you're recording my face. My face is there. And it's like, and I'm squinting. And I was also reading these bits, and I was like in anguish with like because when you read the poem, you'll know, it was like, oh my God, did I really just write that about James, James in the back room of the library, the colonizer? Anyway, I suck at decolonization, apparently. Anyway, we had fun. We had a lot of fun.
That's actually, you've hit the nail on the head, Ravi, when we have these first meetings. And we've just had ours, haven't we, Peter, with yourself and Bibi met last week. Do you feel like the seed has been planted?
Yes.
Do you feel kind of possibility?
Yeah. And,
Hearing
just
your work
kind
and
of,
Bibi's
again,
work,
like what I said.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Because I think in the space, in the space that day in the room, we were, going back and forth, and I thought, oh, this is so easy. This feels so good. And then how my mind works, I always think like this, like, man, I turned 48 this year. Why did this happen 5 years ago? Why did this happen when I was 35? Like, but I think things occur when things are supposed to occur. And because, the things I'm thinking about are like things like, being indigenous, but not being indigenous enough. Being urbanly placed, and then being happy with that space. And I'm from this dirty city. I was raised on these streets, like, and then the othering of language was this thing about being gay, and then being this other kind of thing. And then my father and I's brokenness was about me escaping that brokenness, and so I just looked this way, and then it just allowed me to kind of come into culture. So. Because I think was also about, like, because I come from such a huge family, and all very serious and all very good, and they'll speak the language, and they can plant things, and those things won't die, and I don't have that, and so there was this sense of shame that I carried, which is the reason I don't have language, and the other thing too, my ancestors isn't one place. My mother is Samoan, and she's Scottish, and she's from Vanuatu, and my father, and so, like, it's my ancestors are in different places. So I don't come from a neat history. Mine is untidy. So that's the other reasons why language was even more difficult. But in the room that day with Bibi, he heard me, and I thought, and then we've been talking on WhatsApp, and I've yet to send my lyric essay, because I don't write poetry anymore. I write these long, this long litany of things that sometimes make no sense. But I think that's about construction occurs like that. I don't know. I don't know.
Yes. And what I'm struck by with all of the performers we heard today is how multi-talented you are. And that's why I was kind of asking Ani about weaving. But Cass, you, in your chapbook, it seems like there are these drawings from you and audio, and you've performed with a funk band. Can you talk about some of this, like this collaborative energy, and how does that fit into your work?
Cass, what funk band? I don't know.
No, I just want to say the funk band thing was a one-off. I don't have a band. And that was a gig. Were you there, Nadine? I think maybe you weren't there, but it was in Paikakariki, and it was a fundraiser, and we just got given this awesome backing band, really awesome musicians. Roots funk local musicians in Paikakariki, and we got to do our spoken word with them, and it was just the best experience ever. It's like my, some kind of childhood dream come true or something. Yeah. But normally I don't do that. But I think bookmaking is like the whole of bookmaking I love. And so I make images, and it's like I've got a former life in the arts, art writing and teaching, and I've had that wannabe artist thing. And this is a way to satisfy it. It's like, oh, well, I'm making images, but they're just for books. And it gives me the justification to now make images, but I don't have to call myself an artist or something. And then the actual bookmaking, then that whole process, small run or single print individual books, I love that so much. I still think the words come first, but there's a lot of reclamation in making a book.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head again with the reclamation. I think that's where weaving really comes in for me. Ravi, you were asking me about weaving. And Cass has just used that incredible word, reclamation. And I mean, Ravi, you're beyond, I'm just guessing, beyond a poet. What's your thing?
Oh, well, yeah. So, I most recently I'm a memoirist, because my memoir Correctional came out last year, and I also am a translator. So I translate from the classical.
Yeah. I know you're incredible with words and the page, but what about with your hands?
Oh, yes. What do I do with my hands? Well, I wish that I could play an instrument, or I could like crochet something, but I can I can play sport pretty well. I can play basketball, and I've been told I have unfortunately a pianist's hands, but I might be tone deaf because they're have long digits, but unfortunately I lack the ear to play an instrument. But yes, working with your hands, and I'm a gardener, I should say, so I love to kind of toil in my garden and plant things and tend to things. So
I love that. And I think if you ask any poet what's their, I mean, the phrase side hustle comes to hand, but we've all got, I know Nadine's an incredible knitter, incredible, sitting next to Nadine and watching her knit. And Cass's books are art. She literally hand makes.
This is what I'm showing here. I was frantically trying to show the zines that she's made. So this is part of our connection, Cass and I and Annie. We ended up publishing some books together in a publishing house, but they all began actually as single print books repurposed out of colonial texts. So we ripped them out and repurposed the spines and created our own books. And this is one of these examples. And Cass is an absolute master at this skill. Like, she will take incredible time, and she will, she'll do watercolors. You can't appreciate it. And there's only one copy of this book in the world, and it's mine. And it changes. The whole thing about publishing books is selling them a lot, selling many copies, so you can so that holds up the industry. What does it mean, especially around that word economy? When there's only one copy, well, it increases the value, right? And it changes the nature of what you value. And so that's that bookmaking thing, I really credit to Cass for keeping me at it, because I would have given up. It's a lot harder than it looks. But Cass is so determined like that, so I love working with Cass. I do knit. I knitted this, but I basically knit because I refuse to let the wool defeat me. And like once I have bought that will, I am going to win. I am going to win at national. And just as a side note, I started knitting in my Reo Māori class 8 years ago, or maybe 9 years ago now. And that was that's another whole story. And I've written about it in a story called Taonga Tukuiho. It's about Taonga Tukuiho means treasures passed down. And in my language class, we were asked, what are your treasures passed down? And I was very, what's the word, like petulant. I was like, well, I didn't get any treasures. I didn't get language. I got mental health issues and alcoholism. Thanks, Mom. Anyway, I went home, I couldn't sleep, and I was like, that's it, man. You got, that. I'm sure you got gifts. And I remember that my mum had taught me to knit. And so my knitting journey runs parallel with my language reclamation journey. But I still feel like I knit better than I speak to do. But I wear them both anyway.
Yes, it's too bad Bebe is not here because I wanted to talk to him about his piano practice and his composition as well. Peter, you can talk about how cool.
Yeah. I understand that Peter, Bebe is a renowned pianist. He can,
That is amazing.
like, can you just play us some Beethoven, please, Bebe? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So, and you can kind of hear it in his voice. He's got the rhythm. It's really and I was lucky enough to edit his collection, More Than These Bones, and the space on the page is very much like classical music. There's lots of room. How you were describing Jazz's collection, Cass. There's lots of space. Yeah. There's lots of respect for each word that goes on the page.
Yes.
He's like that as a person. In our conversations, he's very intentional. Like he's very economical with his words. I find that I just flutter all over the place each time. And I'm always sending streams of consciousness. Oh my God, this happened today. And he comes back quite measured. It's very succinct. And there's goodness in that because I don't know. What I was going to say earlier was that one of the things I've been doing for writing, because I feel like, oh my God, Peter, are you even a poet if you're not writing poetry? Because I keep writing these long pieces. So I've taken to cooking. So I find things like, because I grew up really poor here, that there's some things that my mother used to make that we don't ever eat anymore. And I talk to my neighbors, and like Indians here, they'll make this thing called chokka. It's where you roast aubergines on an open fire, and then you peel off the skin, and then you grind into the aubergines dhania, which is coriander and chilies and onion. But they'll never serve it to guests. This is poor food. This is what you make each other. This is what you have for breakfast. And I've been finding like I've been cooking with my sisters again and sitting and talking with them about, what we used to make in the 80s when Dad worked for the Catholic Church, and then making this kind of food with them. And I find it's so much language, because the thing about poor food, there's so much preparation. And I think in a line from Anita Desai's work, she said, this is the work of women, because women were so tasked with children and men that when they were preparing the peas, when they were washing the rice, it was the only time that they had to themselves. And so I find myself doing this in the cutting of the vegetables, the peeling, and I find, my God, nobody talks about these things, which is so funny. So I find myself writing little bits when I finish, when it's on the boil, or we're sitting waiting. And because my sisters are so much older than me, they're in their 70s now. And I find like there's so much, we don't have to talk all the time. So we can spend the whole day together. And there's long periods where we're quiet, where we're staring. Like, she doesn't have a phone. She doesn't care about phones. She's staring. And I find there's so much, oh my good. There's no rush to talk or to check the phone. And the radio's on, like in the 80s in the back. We're just writing little bits. So no, I can't play nothing. I drink a lot. Can I can I put that down as a thing that I do? Like knitting. Making food is this kind of thing, like practice, like making and thinking, and yeah.
Well, I had a meal in Fiji, Peter, that was cooked in an underground earthen oven, a lovo or something. It was. Do you know what that is? It's kind of like it had hot stones, and it was cooked in an underground earthen oven.
It's exactly like a honey. It's tedious, and because I'm the youngest in my family, I'm the one that did all the coconut scraping. I did all the finding of the leaves, all the cleaning. So if anybody says Lovo, I'm not there. I will go and have a curry down the road because it's easy. Because I'm always the one doing all the small. Let's make the coconuts, and so yeah, it's tedious work. It's preparing of the fire, the cooking of the food, the squeezing of the coconut, the making of the palusami. Like that's a whole day preparation. But again, it's like that slow thing, And I wish I could take that time, but I find in my family, I'm the one. Like I'm the one that's go and get this. Where's that? Go and I'm just like no. But making the other things. Love is a big endeavor, and love is special. Like you're not making the honey every other day. It's incredibly special. So I'm glad you had a lover while you were here. So.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Well, I'm just looking at the clock, and what a wonderful conversation. But I think we're nearing the end. And we do have a little bit of a traditional here on IsoBreak, where in finishing we go around and we hear from everyone. To give us something, leave us with something. We kind of the fortune cookie at the end of a delicious meal, some little bit of wisdom, something you're reading or thinking about, something that you want us to carry forward with us. And I might just start because I recently discovered this book by William Appice, who was a Pequot. I mentioned the Pequots were the original custodians of the land here. And he was actually the first Indigenous American to write a memoir or autobiography. It's a book called A Son of the Forest, published in 1829. And he was kind of an abolitionist figure. He spoke about native rights. And of course, no one really has ever heard of him. And it was just a colleague of mine that turned me on to his work. And so I think it's important to not just voice these ideas. Sometimes we can pay lip service to equity and human rights, but to actually put that into action and to make actual pragmatic changes in the world around us. And so that's just a new discovery that I was very excited about that I want to I'll put it in the comments for everyone. But would someone else like to share a little something with us in closing? We'll hear from everyone.
Yes.
Peter, what do you got for us?
Oh my God. So I was gifted this book. It came in the mail the other day, Poetry Pharmacy, where I think he's an English poet, where he goes to book festivals and he sits in a tent and people tells him their problems and he prescribes a poem for them. Based on and so what I was thinking for Fiji, how would one do that in the Pacific? And how can I gather Fijian poems and sit down and listen to people and then prescribe poems for the ailment, for the issue, for their heartbreak? And for not to me just trying to find my favorite poems from like the world, but to be, specific to place and then go back. And because again, like it comes back to language, like because I don't have language, I'm told there's 17 different types of indigenous Fijian poetry in the forms of Serkali, which is written in language. And I thought, imagine if I had language. Imagine if I could curate and bring all those kinds of things together and listen to people and then say, this one is for you. And I thought, how lovely for you to go and tell somebody your problem, and they will give you this little poem, and you will read it again and again to help you. I got it on Tuesday. What's today? I got on Tuesday last week, and every day I go to a new part, whether it's about depression, and I open the book and I read, and I think, oh, this is so glorious to help people, physically help them. Oh, that was so lovely.
So beautiful.
Well, thank you, Peter. Nadine, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I would love to share some words. That was beautiful. There's so many. It's been such a privilege. Thank you so much, Ravi, for facilitating so beautifully and fluidly, even on mute. You were just gorgeous to look at. You didn't even need words. Sound, who needs sound? And to Peter, who's like, I was like, oh my God, it's another cyclone. He's gone like that, but I've got to go. And then Black scream, oh my God, is he all right? And of course, to Bebe, who's not here, but whose words will stay with me, and I can't wait. Congratulations to him on his new book. But I want to end with a mihi, an acknowledgement and love to my sisters, to Annie, to Cass, and particularly, of course, to Alison. And I'm going to close by reading just another little bit of her letter. I love the way that she, like a tuakana to me, so a person in whom, I follow the footsteps, as someone looking one day to publish a book. And I really want to just reference that Annie, in the very first email that she ever sent us, and this sort of like matrix that she weaves, she's a weaver of people as well as flax and as of fiber. And her email title was Weaving Connection. So to you, Annie, for the beautiful work that you do. And this is just one more paragraph from Alison. Alison, if you're watching this, thank you for trusting me and for coming with me on this journey. It's been a real privilege. Some of our pain made it to the page, the trivial, the petty, the enormous, the anguished. Most of it didn't. It went along with some of our joy, the sincere, the deflective, the fears, the known, the cloudy. Ours wasn't an attempt to document the experiences themselves as much as how they blocked us into a kind of silence. A mutual acknowledgement that we could not, as much as poetic ego might otherwise have us believe, do it alone in a colony. So to all of those of us living under the oppression of colony, good night and good morning.
Thank you, Nadine. Cass?
Kia ora. Thank you, everybody. It's been really beautiful, and I'm sorry I've been slightly technologically that brick wall again. And then the strange silent, I think he's introduced me now. I think I should start now. But your hosting has been beautiful, Ravi. Thank you so much. And thanks to you as well, Annie, for helping bring us all together, and for, of course, organising this whole fair trade project, which is just so beautiful for all the reasons we've been talking about. And Peter, a mihi to you, and it's lovely to see you again after Brisbane, and Nadine, and yeah, my sisters, it's lovely to be here together. And I had another poem I wanted to read from Jazz, and I think I'm going to finish with just a few bits of it, because I think that they speak to what we're doing here. We got a black prime minister. She's deadly. This is from the poem called We Rise. We got a black prime minister. She's deadly. She's hot pink, hot stuff. She brings her titters and they love us. They whip their hair, kiss the bubs. It's all different now. They dreamt up this future and invited us with them. Turns out the future is technicolor, black, black, brown. Turns out we're all welcome here. And the last bit, I stand proud, because when Auntie Maya wrote, Still I Rise, I know she was thinking of us, hey, all of us, black, black, brown.
Wonderful. And to have the echo of Maya Angelou in the air as well. Thank you so much, Cass. And there's a comment from one of our viewers, Anju, who says there's a revival in India as well, and more people are trying to document indigenous stories and poetry, which is wonderful. And maybe the perfect time to have you send this off, Ani. This has been so wonderful. Thank you for all the work you do with Fair Trade and Red Room and bringing together all of these voices. Extraordinary. So,
Ravi, you're a jazz musician. You real. I don't know if you like jazz, but the way that you've played us all together tonight, you've just brought us together like some kind of jazz band and made us all feel right at home. And speaking of right at home, that's exactly what one of the outcomes of Fair Trade is. When we have our Zooms and we're meeting up, I always say to the collaborators, yeah, poem schmolm, you're going to write a poem. You're going to collaborate a poem. You're going to write something. It's going to be great. But what I really want is for that long-term, solid friendship, support, reciprocity, being one day in each other's kitchens, having a cuppa. And that's really what Fair Trade is all about. It's about building those relationships. So, it's been such an honor tonight for me tonight, for you today. I hope you don't have a busy day ahead, do you, Ravi?
oh no, it's fine. I'm now feeling really inspired, and I'm bringing with me the idea of gangsta friendship.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. I love that phrase. Hey, let me just finish really quickly with this. This is from Natalie Harkin, who's one of the collaborators. Do you know Natalie? Ravi? Does that name ring a bell?
I don't think her name is familiar, but I don't think I know.
Yeah. You need to check her out, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So Natalie Harkin, she collaborated with Leanne Bettisomoko Simpson. And their poem was titled "We Are the Moon." I'm thinking we're the moon tonight. We are each other. We're all we have. We're spread across from here to Palestine, to Narunga, to inside my bones. We're spread out, the pieces between us, sewing one to the next, patching and repairing, weaving and braiding. We spread out our thoughts like stars in the sky. I'm thinking beside, inside, alongside. We start again and again in practice of elsewhere. We start over and start over and start over in practice of hope. I'm thinking we are the moon tonight.
I love that. We are the moon tonight.
Oh, I think that on that note, it's the night for many people I know, and so the moon is rising. I want to give another thank you to everyone, and Bebe, who's not here as well, whose voices will echo. On behalf of Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop and Red Room Poetry and the Fair Trade Collective, I want to thank all of you for watching. This event will be recorded and will be available on YouTube later, so you can pass it around for those who might have missed it. But thank you all so much. Stay safe, and we're looking forward to hearing about all of your projects, and especially this book of collaborations when it comes out. Can't wait for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
And thank you, Sally Breen. Thank you, Sally.
There's a comment here. Sally says, thank you all for the amazing readings. So
thank you for picking up the email and responding so positively, Sally. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Stay safe. Until next
Thank
time.
you.
I'm Ravi Shankar. This has been IsoBreak. Take care and see you all later.
Pumarie.
Pumarie.
Pumarie.